Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Women Members Excellence Committee of ICAI, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to Yashaswini and Idol series number 30. Yashaswini and Idol is a Wednesday series of programs conducted by WIMAC for the women CAs by the women CAs. This series is an extension of High Sky Symposium, which concluded its 100th episode. It is one of the committee's initiatives to not only disseminate information to women members on technical updation and non technical skills, but also to empower and inspire women members to come at forefront and realize their verbal skills at public forum. Now, I introduce you to our today's first speaker. Profile of CA Sajia Khatri. CA Sajia Khatri has 13 years of post-qualification experience specializing in transfer pricing. She has advised multinationals on planning strategies, documentation, audit, and APA discussions, representing clients in various industries, including IT, financial services, shipping, and logistics. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me just share the screen. Yeah, is the screen visible?
Yes.
It is
Yes, we can see.
Great. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and it's a privilege. I thank WMEC for giving me this opportunity. As we know, the transfer pricing regulation in India was introduced in 2001, White Section 92 to 92F. And over these last 23 years, the provisions they have evolved to compass the global development, including the BEPS initiatives which were undertaken at the OECD, G20, and the global level. Now, the way these provisions are structured, they are on the basic principle that any income or expense which is arising from an international transaction with associated enterprise or in relation to specified domestic transaction shall be computed having regard to the arm's length price. Now, each of these terms, let it be associated enterprise, international transaction, specified domestic transaction, these are specifically defined under the Act, wide various section under this Chapter 10. One such provision is the requirement of filing an accountant's report in form number PCEB, which emanates from Section 92E. So today we'll be touching upon what is this form, what are the various clauses in this form, what are the practical consideration in filling each of these clauses as an accountant that we should be mindful of. How does the e-filing procedure of this form PCP work, and what are the other practical aspects that one needs to take care of? So this is an overall agenda that we'll be covering in this today's session. Now, given the time, because this subject in itself is so wide that it may take hours to if we were to really deliberate on each of those things. Given the time, I have tried to cover the key aspect or the key practical consideration for each of these clauses. And I'll be happy to take any questions that the participants may have at the end of the session as the time permits. So as we know, the requirement for filing an accountant's report emanates from Section 92E. Now, the way the section words is, it says that every person who has entered into an international transaction or specified domestic transaction has to obtain a report from an accountant and has to furnish this report within the specified date. Now, what is this report from an accountant? Under Rule 10E, it says that it is form number GCEB. Now, some of the key important aspects that we need to be mindful of, that the onus is cast on every person. So either be it resident, non-resident, even a permanent establishment, if they have entered into any transaction, international transaction or specified domestic transaction, they have to obtain this accountant's report. Now, who has to issue this accountant's report? There's a report from an accountant. And an accountant is specifically defined under Section 288 of the Income Tax Act, where we have to meet the independence criteria. So it could be a statutory auditor or any chartered accountant who meets the independence requirement can issue this form number 3CED. It has to be filed on or before the specified date. The specified date is 1 month before the due date of filing the return of income. Now, as we know, in case of the transfer pricing cases, the return of income needs to be filed by 30th November. So 1 month prior to that comes to 31st October. So this form needs to be furnished by 31st October and it needs to be filed electronically. Now, there is no threshold for furnishing this form. Even if there is 1 rupee of international transaction, then the form number 3CB has to be furnished. For specified domestic transaction, there's a threshold of 20 crore which is given. So only if your SDT transactions are more than 20 crore, this form needs to be furnished and TP documentation needs to be maintained. Another thing that we need to be mindful of as a chartered accountant that this is an assurance acceptance or akin to an audit acceptance. So before we take up an assignment for form number 3CEB, we have to take a no objection certificate from the previous accountants who would have issued the form in case of the taxpayers. Being an attestation or an assurance engagement, there's a requirement to obtain a UDIN and mention that UDIN in the form, even in the electronic form that needs to be furnished. There's a guidance note which is issued by Institute of Chartered Accountants, the latest version being in October 2022, which provides a detailed guidelines on how each of these clauses needs to be filled in and how as an accountant are our duties, roles and responsibility in terms of this form. So let us look at how does this form is structured. So the way this form is structured, you have the report of an accountant. Then there are three parts, which are basically the annexures to form number 3CB. Part A, which contains the general information. Part B, which runs from clause 10 to clause 20, it gives the details of international transaction. And part C, which runs from clause 21 to clause 26, which gives the details of the specified domestic transaction. So let's look at each of these. Let's dissect this form into these four parts and look at what are the contents of this form in greater detail. Now, this is how the report of an accountant is. This is a report. Now, if you see, there are three paragraphs of this report. These are distinct paragraphs. The first paragraph states that as an accountant, we have verified the books and records in relation to the international transaction. So our verification or examination is limited to the records in respect of international transaction or specified domestic transaction. We are not required to comment on the true and fair view of the financial statement. So the scope of evaluation or examination is limited. The second para is an opinion from an accountant to say that the assessee has maintained proper information and documentation as prescribed under section 92D. So in case during our evaluation, there is a situation where the taxpayer has not maintained any documentation which they are required to maintain under section 92D read with rule 10D, then as an accountant, it's our responsibility to qualify that as a part of this report. Now the third paragraphs again gives an opinion that whatever particulars have been disclosed as a part of annexure to this form, which we saw part A, part B, and part C, they contain the detail which are true and correct. Now this is an important nomenclature. What we are certifying is true and correct, and this is distinct from true and fair. When we say true and correct, the emphasis is on the factual accuracy of the particulars being submitted as a part of this form. As we move further to this form, we go to the annexure to Form PCEB. Part A is a general detail covering the name of the assessee, the address, the nature of business, the assessment year, the values of the transaction. It's a generic information that needs to be filled in. The basic informations like the assessee, name of the assessee, address, and all mostly in an online version is auto-populated. Um, as far as two important things over here, one is the nature of business or the activities of the assessee. This is a code which needs to be picked up as per the instruction of ITR 6. So there is no separate code which is prescribed for this form. The reliance has to be placed in the ITR 6. There's a nuance in respect of the aggregate value of specified domestic transaction which needs to be reported over here. Now, while the assessee may have entered into specified domestic transaction, but they are less than 20 crore. So what do we write over here? The view is that you should mention nil because uh, in order to qualify it as an SDT, your threshold is prescribed as 20 crore. And if your overall limit is not being breached, then your reporting as far as this form is concerned is nil. So the aggregate value of specified domestic transaction as per books of account needs to be specified as nil if the threshold is not being crossed. When we move to part B, uh, we, as I said earlier, clause 10 to clause 20 will cover the details of international transaction. So when we start this section, clause 10, which is the starting clause, we need to report the details of all the associated enterprise with whom the taxpayer has entered into the international transaction. Now, important thing over here to consider is that uh, the definition of associated enterprise is different from a related party as per the financial state. We have those 13 conditions in section 92A2, which needs to be clearly evaluated to identify if the enterprise is an associated enterprise or not. And the nature of that relationship needs to be mentioned as a part of this clause. Now, what if the A relationship is only for a part of the year? Let's say the enterprise was an associated enterprise from 1st April to 31st July. From 1st August, the nature of relationship was no longer in existence. Then, do we have to mention it over here? If yes, then what about the transaction to be covered in the latter part of the form? Do I have to report, do we as an accountant have to report the transaction value of the entire year or only a part of the year? Now, when we read section 92A, it says that at any time during the year, when an enterprise is an is deemed to be an associated enterprise, at any time during the year, the following condition is satisfied. So, if at any time during the year, maybe it may be a part of the year, still you will be considered as an associated enterprise for the whole of that year. And on a prudent basis, it is advisable to report the value of entire transaction for the whole of the year with corresponding note in the observation column to say that the AE relationship have changed on so and so date, and this are the value of the transaction prior when the AE relationship existed and when the AE relationship was diluted. Now, what about deemed international transaction? As we know, Section 92B to assume certain transactions with unrelated party as deemed international transaction. Whether those third parties have to come under this clause, the answer is no. As per the ICI guidance note, what Section 92B2 assume is deems a transaction to be an international transaction. It doesn't create an A relationship between the taxpayer and the third party. And therefore, as the clause requires the detail to be mentioned only of associated enterprise, any transaction deemed international transaction, the party to the deemed international transaction will not be reported as a part of clause 10. As far as other clauses from clause 11 to clause 20 are concerned, these detail down various international transactions and the particulars which needs to be furnished in respect of each of those international transactions. Clause 11 dealing with tangible property. Under clause 11, we have three subparts. Clause 11A being in the nature of raw material or consumable, either be it purchase or sale. 11B being the finished goods or the traded goods. So particulars in respect of purchase and sale of traded or finished goods needs to be furnished as a part of clause 11B. And clause 11C is with respect to purchase or sale of any other tangible property. Now, when we say any other tangible property, it could be purchase of any capital goods or a fixed asset, which needs to be reported as a part of 11C. Now, what are the details that are requested as a part of the clause? And this is applicable to all the clauses in the form. The particulars more or less remains the same with one or two variation here and there for each of the clauses. So what needs to be furnished is the name of the AE, the address, the PAN or any other identification number, the description of the transaction. Here, since it is a tangible property, there's a requirement to even mention the quantity of the property which is being purchased. Type, is it payable, is it receivable, the amounts as per the books of account, amount as per the ALP, and what is the method which is selected. There is also an observation column, which is nothing but a space given to provide any clarificatory note that we intend to mention just to clarify this international transaction. Now, a couple of practical consideration in this clause. Let's say there is a lack of quantitative data which is available, or the quantitative data is numerous, it can't be quantified, we don't know, there are various types of consumables which are there and it's difficult to quantify it. As per the ICI guidance note, as an accountant, we should clarify that it is not possible to quantify it. And as a part of the form, we can mention it as various or numerous in the quantity. Another practical aspect that we have seen, what if the raw materials are sold before they are being utilized for the manufacturing? Now that is to be treated as traded goods or it has to be reported as a part of clause 11A. Guidance note prescribes that it has to be reported as part of clause 11A because the nature of material is still a raw material. If there's a transaction of purchase of fixed asset, however, the assessee has not capitalized those fixed assets, they are still part of capital work in progress. Is there a requirement to report it in this clause? Yes, there is a requirement to report it. However, in the observation column, as an accountant, we may specify that these fixed assets which are purchased are still not capitalized and are reported as capital work in progress as far as the financial statements are concerned. Moving on to the next clause. Clause 12 is in respect of any kind of a purchase or sale or license of an intangible property. What are the things that needs to be reported over here? It could be royalty payment. It could be any kind of purchase of IP that gets reported as a part of clause 12. One critical thing that often comes into discussion, what about marketing intangibles? Now, this is an area where, as an accountant, we have to apply some due diligence. Uh, uh, we need to see if the expenses, the marketing expenses or the advertisement, marketing and promotional expenses which are incurred by the taxpayer, are they for their own benefit, for their own products for selling in the Indian market? Or is it something that there is a mutual understanding with the associated enterprise for a benefit to the associated enterprise? And as an accountant, we need to appropriately take a judgment or professional judgment call whether to report it or whether those A&P expenses will qualify as a marketing intangible or they are more of a local expenses over here. Moving on further, clause 13 is in respect of services. So we covered tangible goods, tangible property, we covered intangible property. Now comes the services. So in clause 13, if there is any kind of a service which you have availed, which as a taxpayer has availed or has rendered, needs to be reported. The details to be reported are same as earlier, your name of the AE, your description of a transaction, the amount, whether it is paid or it is received, amount as per the ALP method selected, and then there is a column for the notes to be put in. Now, what if there is a cost to cost transaction? whether it needs to be reported as a part of clause 13 or clause 19, which is a residual clause. Now, the differentiating factor which will determine whether it is clause 13 or clause 19 is the existence of a service. So, if there is a service element to a transaction, then it needs to be reported as clause 13. For example, let's say the taxpayer is providing IT services to an associated enterprise on cost to cost basis. Now, if there is an element of service involved and it is not merely a reimbursement, then it needs to be reported as a part of clause 13. Another practical issue that we have seen is with respect to treatment of withholding tax. Now, let's say there are certain cases where the withholding tax is borne by the assessee and it is not the net remittance which is paid to the AE. In this case, should the amount which is to be reported should be gross or the net of withholding tax? It is advisable that the amount which is reported in this clause is gross of withholding, is inclusive of withholding tax, and appropriate disclosure is made in the observation column. Moving on further, clause 14 is in respect of lending or borrowing of money. So this covers any kind of a loan, ECBs, debentures, non-convertible debentures, which are in the nature of debt instrument. Particulars needs to be furnished if an assessee has entered into this transaction. Particular needs to be furnished as a part of clause 14. The critical question that comes in the amounts as per books and an amount as per the ALP, is it the principal amount which needs to be reported or is it the interest amount which needs to be reported? Now, as we saw, the ALP needs to be determined for any item which impacts the income or an expense. Now, here in this case, interest is an element which will impact my taxable income in a computation of income. So the amount which needs to be reported as a part of this clause is the interest amount, and principal could be mentioned as a part of notes in the observation column. Now, what if there is a transaction of a loan or a borrowing, but it is an interest-free loan? The assessee is not paying any kind of an interest to its associated enterprise. Do we still have to report it under this clause? The answer is yes, we will have to do a reporting because there is a lending transaction. We may mention the interest rate as zero and the amounts as per book as zero, whatever it be, but the reporting requirement needs to be done. Now, a litigious issue, which there are a lot of judicial precedents so far and divergent precedents on this, is your outstanding receivable and payable at the end of the year. Is it needs to be reported as a part of this clause? Because the clause says lending or borrowing, which includes advance payment, deferred payment, or receivable. Now, the views, even the way the judicial pronouncements have been, there are two views on this. One is that outstanding receivable and payable are not a separate international transaction. They are subsumed when you report any principal international transaction, because your outstanding receivable payable arises only because there's an international transaction which have been entered in. And once I report my primary transaction, this is just a consequent to that. So there's a view that routine receivable and payable need not be reported as a part of clause 14. However, if those receivable and payable become overdue with significant delay, then the the balance or the outstanding balance, it changes its categorization. It is a money which is lying with the associated enterprise. If let's say the receivable of the taxpayer have been overdue for more than 365 days, it's the taxpayer's money which have been lying with the associated enterprise, and therefore in a prudent arm's length basis, there should have been an interest which should have been earned by the assessee. In those cases, the outstanding receivable may merit a disclosure as a part of this clause. So again, this is an area where as an accountant, we will have to do some fact finding and a due diligence on our part with respect to disclosure of outstanding receivable or payable. Clause 15 is in respect of the guarantee transaction. So if there is any guarantee fee which is paid or received in respect of any guarantee which is given by or to the associated enterprise, that needs to be reported as a part of clause 15. The details are similar. What needs to be reported over here is the guarantee fee, like the interest amount, the guarantee fee which is received or paid. It needs to be reported as a part of clause 15. As far as the guaranteed amount is concerned, it may be mentioned as a part of the observation or the note. Even if it is a free of cost guarantee, being an international transaction has to be maintained as a part, it has to be reported as a part of clause 15 with an appropriate disclosure that the guarantee fee is zero and the guarantee amount is nil. Now, a interesting question which comes is what is the treatment of letter of comfort? Now, letter of comfort is not a guarantee. Do we have to still report it as a part of clause 15 or not? Now, the way the judicial precedents are in respect of letter of comfort, it says that if this letter of comfort is enforceable by the lender, if this letter of comfort is enforceable by the lender, then it takes the color of a guarantee and it's no longer only a comfort letter. So, whenever there is a letter of LOC which is issued or which is given by the associated enterprises, it is important to check the terms and conditions of the US LOC to determine if it requires a reporting as a guarantee or not. If it is enforceable by the lender, then it takes a color of a guarantee and would need the reporting as a part of clause 15. Clause 16 is in respect of marketable securities. When we say marketable securities, is either your equity shares, preference shares, convertible, compulsorily convertible debentures, or anything which is in the nature of the capital, equity capital, buyback, issue, allotment. These are covered as a part of clause 16 in the form. Now, the question arises that when we saw the definition under Section 92, it says any income or an expense. Now, what is an income or an expense which is arising when there is an issue of shares happening by the taxpayer to its associated enterprise? Now, this particular issue was under litigation in 2013, if my memory goes correct, and it traveled the issue traveled to High Court. And Bombay High Court, in case of Vodafone, said that there is no income which arises when the shares are issued, even be it as the premium to the non-resident associated enterprise. And therefore, ALP or the transfer pricing provision should not apply. Now, if that being the case, TP provision should not apply. Is there a requirement to report it? Our ICI guidance note suggests that we report those transactions on an abundant caution and mention the position that, basis the Vodafone ruling or the view of the assessee, these transactions they do not impact the income or an expense. Moving further to clause 17, it is in respect of mutual agreement or arrangement. Now, when we say mutual agreement or an arrangement, what kind of transaction gets covered into this clause? This clause, if there are any kind of a transaction in nature of cost allocation or cost contribution arrangement or any kind of a mutual arrangement for sharing of the cost, then those transactions needs to be reported as a part of clause 17. Again, the details to be reported or the particulars to be reported are same, which is your name of the AE, the type of the transaction, the description of the transaction, the amount as per the books of account, the amount as per the AE, method selected, and the observation. Now, as an accountant, what are the points that we need to take care of when we certify with regard to documents under Section 92D or Rule 10D? What kind of documents would we maintain as far as these kind of a transaction of cost allocation are concerned? It could be intercompany agreement, your intercompany invoices, the cost allocation workings, the reasonableness of the allocation keys which are used for cost allocations. Is there really a receipt of services? Now, this is an area which is under litigation. Whether as a transfer pricing transfer pricing subject, do we get into the need and the receipt of services, or is it the scope of Section 37? Now, that's a different debate in itself. But we need to at least have these basic. We need when we are issuing a Form 3CB, these are the basic information that we may see to conclude that relevant documentation as per Section 92D are maintained as far as the cost allocation transactions are concerned. Moving further, Clause 18, the particulars in respect of business restructuring or reorganization needs to be reported. Now, interesting thing is that this is the only clause where there is no requirement to report any amount. So the particulars that needs to be submitted are the name of the AE, the nature of transaction, the terms of the restructuring, and method selected and observation. There is no requirement to mention any kind of an amount for this transaction. The reason being the way the section 92B explanation is worded, it says that a business restructuring or a reorganization would be an international transaction, irrespective of the fact whether it has a bearing on profit, income, loss, or asset. So even if there is no consideration, we need to report. If it is in the nature of business restructuring, we need to report as a part of clause 18. Now, what is business restructuring? The term is not defined in the Income Tax Act. So guidance is taken from OECD. Now, OECD defines a business restructuring in two forms, either be it an operational change or be it an organizational change. Now, when we say of an operational change, it is, let's say, the functional profile of the associate has changed during the year. Earlier, it was a full-fledged manufacturing entity. Now, it has moved as a contract manufacturer. So there's a change, the operational change as far as the assessee is concerned. There's a change in the functional profile. The FAR or the characterization of the entity has changed from being a full-fledged manufacturer to a contract manufacturer. And those kind of situation, those kind of changes needs to be reported as a part of business restructuring. Or there could be a merger. Let's say there's a domestic merger of two group companies, or there's a demerger which is happening now. In case of a closed group, the role of the overseas entity in these kind of a merger or demerger cannot be ruled out. So the facts and circumstances needs to be critically evaluated, and appropriate disclosure needs to be done as a part of this clause if there is any kind of a merger demerger having influence of the overseas enterprises. Moving on further, we have clause 19. Now, clause 19, the way it is headed is any other transaction having bearing on profit, income, loss, or asset. Now, this is a residual clause. So, any transaction which is not covered in the previous clauses, clause 11 to clause 18, but there is those transactions that needs to be reported as a part of clause 19. Now, what could those be? It could be either in the nature of reimbursement of expenses where there is no element of service, but let's say some courier charges are incurred on behalf of the overseas enterprises and those are being paid or recovered on cost to cost basis. Now, this is primarily being done from an administrative convenience perspective. So those may be reported as a part of clause 19. Now, other could be an example of dividend paid or received. Now, the question arises, is dividend an international transaction? Logically, no, because it's more of an appropriation of a profit or distribution of a profit to the shareholders that a company is declaring a dividend. Now, there is no clear guidance as far as dividend paid or received is concerned. There are two uh, practices which are prevalent in uh, in the industry. One is where the dividend is being reported as an international transaction as a part of the proper clause with the details being mentioned, or uh, it is reported by way of a note in your general clauses. So these are the two practices which are prevalent. Moving on further, we have clause 20, which is the details with respect to deemed international transaction. Now, as we know, there's a specific definition under section 92B2, which deems a transaction with a third party as an international transaction. So if there is any kind of such transaction, then the details needs to be reported as a part of clause 20. We move further to part C. Now, part C is basically the details in respect of specified domestic transaction. Now, as we know, this is Supreme Court in case of GlaxoSmithKline had somewhere commented that when there is a tax arbitrage, even when there is a dealing between two domestic enterprises, there is a possibility that the companies may shift the profit from a low tax paying entity, from a high tax paying entity to a low tax paying entity. And therefore, Supreme Court, in their wisdom, recommended the CBDT to come out with some way, like in transfer pricing, to evaluate if the transactions are entered into at market price or not. And post that, specified domestic transactions were introduced under the Income Tax Act as a part of transfer pricing. Now, in order to ensure that uh, small taxpayers are not burdened with the compliance, a threshold of 20 crore, earlier it was 5 crore, which was increased to 20 crore, was set. We also had 48 2B transactions which were covered earlier, which now were removed in 2017, just to ensure that there is an ease of compliance. So the way today Part C stands as of today, it covers inter-unit transactions between the eligible business and the non-eligible business of the assessee. So if let's say an assessee has a unit as a SEZ unit and non-SEZ unit, SEZ unit claiming some kind of a tax holiday, and if there is any kind of a transaction between SEZ and a non-SEZ unit, which is an inter-unit transaction, those are covered as a part of SDT. We also have any business transactions which are entered into between a taxpayer, which is an eligible assessee. Eligible assessee is an entity who is claiming tax holiday deduction, and a closely connected person. So we typically call it Section 80IA 10 transaction. Those are part of SDT today. SDT provisions even extended to the new domestic companies which are availing the concessional tax rate under Section 115 BAB, and also domestic cooperative housing societies, manufacturing cooperative housing societies who are availing concessional tax rate under Section 115 BAB. So this is the overview of specified domestic transaction, and the particulars which needs to be furnished as a part of clause C are in respect of these kind of taxpayers. So starting with clause 21 and ending at clause 26, which is the last clause in the form CCEA. Clause 21, again, we need to give the details of the associated enterprise with whom the assessee has entered into specified domestic transaction. So those needs to be given. Clause 22 covers inter-unit transaction. Clause 23 will cover your 80IA 10 kind of a transaction, which is transaction with closely connected person. We'll be discussing these particular two clauses, clause 22 and clause 23, in the subsequent slide in detail. As far as the other two, clause 24, this will cover your domestic, newly domestic manufacturing companies who are availing the concessional tax rate, and clause 25 will cover the details in respect of those taxpayers which are newly manufacturing cooperative housing society availing a concessional tax rate. 26 is a residual clause. For now, we don't have any other SDT which have been prescribed. So this clause more or less remains unfilled as far as a practical application is concerned. Now, this is how clause 22 of form number 3CB looks like. It has two parts. Clause 22A covers transfer of goods or services from one undertaking unit or an eligible business to another eligible business. So what is intended to be covered or reported as a part of clause 22A is sale of goods or provision of a services from assessor's eligible business. As we discussed, if there is a sale of services by SEZ unit to a non-SEZ unit, then that needs to be reported as a part of clause 22A. The other part is with respect to acquisition. So while A covers the sale, the B reports the acquisition, which is purchase. So if let's say the SEZ unit has availed certain services from a non-SEZ unit, then that needs to be reported as a part of clause 22B. The particulars that needs to be reported are standard, the name of the assessee, the description of the transaction, the amount which is either received or paid, received in case of A and paid in case of B. amount as per the books of accounts and amount as per the ALP method which is used. And again, we as an online form, we have the observation column. Clause 23 will cover any transaction with a closely connected person. Now, here it says any business transacted. So it could be a transaction of income or an expense, which needs to be reported. Now, interesting thing, when we look at this clause, it reads as, has the assessee entered into any specified domestic transaction with any associated enterprise, which has resulted in more than ordinary profits to the eligible business to which Section 80 IA 10 or Section 10 AA applies. Now, what needs to be reported over here is only if your transaction have resulted in more than ordinary profit. Now, if it has resulted in more than ordinary profit, there is a requirement to make an ALP adjustment because you can't have more than ordinary exemption being claimed on more than ordinary profit. Now, if let's say there are transactions with closely connected persons, but those have not resulted in more than ordinary profit, is there a disclosure required? The answer is no. The disclosure is not required, but we will have to mention because as a we will have to give a complete disclosure to say that there were certain transactions which were which to which section 80IA 10 applies. However, they have not resulted in more than ordinary profit, and the value of those transactions has to be considered as a part of part A, where we saw the aggregate value of specified domestic transaction. So while the aggregate value of specified domestic transaction will include these 80IA 10 transaction, but if they have not resulted in more than ordinary profit, this clause will be answered as no, and the details will be left blank. Now, similar things apply to clause 24 and clause 25 because even for 115BAB and 115BAE entities, the requirement of a disclosure only arises when there is more than ordinary profit, which is arising to the eligible or the concessional tax availing entity. Now, once as an accountant, I have filled up this form. How how does it get filed online? So as we know, today all filings, most of the filings are being done online, and Form 3CB is no exception. The task, the steps are similar to a tax audit report, where the first step is on the assessee to assign form number 3CEB to a chartered accountant on the income tax portal. So assessee will log in into its account on the income tax portal, add a CA for form number 3CEB, which will trigger an intimation to the CA accept the form. Now, once that assignment is done, as a chartered accountant, we will log in to the income tax portal, accept the form 3CB assignment, and that's where the preparation of the online form starts. Now, there are three options which are available to us to file this form 3CB. One is that we fill the particulars online. The other is an option of CSVs. CSVs are nothing but Excel templates which are prescribed, which needs to be filled in, converted into the CSVs and uploaded on the income tax portal. And other is an offline version, which wherein we can use various third-party softwares to generate a JSON file and upload it on the income tax portal. Now, once a form is uploaded using the DSC of a chartered accountant, again an intimation gets triggered to the assessee to review and accept the form. So the assessee will log in into this income tax portal, go to the working tab pending list. The assessee will be able to download the uploaded form, review it once, and then accepts the form using its DSC. Important to note that a form number 3CEB will not be considered to be filed unless the assessee has accepted the form using a DSC. So while a chartered accountant may have uploaded the form on, let's say, 30th October, but the assessee accepts the form on 1st November, it will be considered as delayed filing because your filing date will be the date when the assessee accepts the form. So it is important as a chartered accountant that we ensure that the assessees review and accept the filed accepts the uploaded form before the due date, which is 31st October, so as to not to trigger any delayed filing. Are there any provisions for revision of Form 3CB? Can the Act permit me? Does the Act permit me to revise a Form 3CB which has been filed? Now, while there is no specific provisions under the Income Tax Act to say that you can revise a form number 3CEB, but today the income tax portal website, it allows for filing a revised form number 3CEB. So practically it is possible while there is no specific provisions under the Act. Few important things that which needs to be taken care of, that when we are revising a form number 3CB online on the portal, which currently it is which allows it, we need to give a reason why the form is being revised. So the reason could be either that some transaction was missed, or there may be some typo or a human error which would have cropped up. Maybe the amount punched it had 1 0 less. So those reason needs to be mentioned why we are revising a form number 3CB when that steps needs to be taken. Again, separate UDIN needs to be taken for a revised form number 3CB because the earlier UDIN cannot continue. As we discussed earlier, the applicability of obtaining form number 3CEB is on any person, so which includes a foreign companies. So if let's say foreign company has earned a royalty income from its associated enterprise in India, the foreign company is also required to file a form number 3CEB. Similarly, there's an equal applicability to any permanent establishment of an overseas entity if they have entered into any international transaction which has a bearing on their return of income. There are stringent penalties which are prescribed for non-furnishing of the accountant's report. While if you fail to furnish an accountant's report, the penalty is 1 lakh under Section 271BA. It will also be considered as failure to report an international transaction, and probably penalty under 271 AA may also get triggered, which is equivalent to 2% of the value of international transaction. Now that's a very harsh, because it's linked to the value at which you have undertaken your international transactions. If you have missed to report any transaction which is of a high value, 2% of that is a penalty which gets triggered. Under Section 271 AA, there are three kind of default which will trigger the penalty. One is either you fail to report an international transaction, or there's a failure to maintain any kind of prescribed documentation, or incorrect information or documentation have been furnished. Then the penalty is 2% of the value of international transaction. At the time of assessment, if there is a failure to furnish any kind of an information while you may have maintained it but not furnished it, then penalty under 271G gets triggered, which is 2% of the value of international transaction. That was it from my side. I'll be happy to take if there are any questions from the participants. And thank you so much again for giving me this opportunity. I will stop sharing my screen and hand over the dais to the moderators. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hi. So there is one request, like, can you share the PPT presented in the webinar?
I can share it with the moderators, ICI, and they may then probably upload it on the portal, or I would leave it up to the moderators. I can share the presentation, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no other questions on the chat.
Great. Thank you. Hope the session was useful. And as we all gear up for the month of October.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so next next session is for Dr. Sangeeta Pandit. And hi everyone, thanks WMEC for organizing the session. I would read out the profile of Dr. Sangeeta Pandit. She is the HOD of Finance at leading management institute and an independent director in many listed companies. With over 2 decades of chartered accountancy experience, she actively promotes financial literacy and has authored several research papers. She was awarded the CA Educator Award in 2022. So, handing over to Dr. Sangeeta Pandit.
Yeah. Sorry, I think my audio was off. The topic given to me is communication skills for success and happiness. So let me tell you that when I just started my practice and I was very young and we used to attend conferences and it was all face to face, of course, that time. And we used to, be very eager and passionate about hard skills. And when it came to soft skills, in fact, you know, we used to just take it very lightly and not give much importance to it. It's only later on, as I started becoming older and older, I realized that how soft skills are as important as hard skills. And now I teach in a B school, and I see that how students who've done their MBA are getting picked up for the same roles as chartered accountants do, and at a higher salaries only because that they can communicate. So I think for us chartered accountants, this is something extremely essential that we have to focus on. That yes, hard skills is very much needed. I mean, we all know the decision of substance over form, but equally today's world, today's times, soft skills are important. And what is this communication today being an issue? One of the reasons is, um, uh, let's say, actually, first, what is communication? That whatever you speak or you write, the opposite person should understand the way you wanted to, what you wanted to say, or what you wanted to tell while in your written format, or whatever you are reading or whatever you are listening, it should be whatever the opposite person wants to say. So it's a two-way communication, but people are not aligned, and that is why the main issue arises. And why is it so? So today you have people of different generations working under one roof. You have people, the baby boomers era, people who are in their early 60s, people who are in their baby boomers were would be their late 60s, early 60s, late 50s. You have Gen Y, the millennials, who may be in their say late 40s, and you have Gen Z born after 97 in their late 30s or so. So imagine in your office, your grandfather is also working, your uncle is also working, your nephews, nieces, the older ones are also working, and small kids are also working, all of them together. And each generation is sort of molded by things which happened during their times. Like a person in Europe who has not seen the Iron Curtain days, who has not seen USSR how it was, East Europe how it was, today cannot understand. They are different from those who were born before the crash of the fall of the Iron Curtain. Or even in India, those people who were born after the license Raj, or those who were born maybe now start doing business, is different. So subconsciously we get uh, influenced by the macroeconomic factors which have happened during our lifetime. And we all have a different way of speaking, different way of talking. So the first rule in communication is, when you are speaking, you have to be mindful to which generation you are speaking to. Second, what is happening is that we all know are strong in English and our mother tongue. But often we have to converse or we have to transact or we have to negotiate in a language in which we are not strong with. So one should never do that. One should always speak in the language one is good at, the language and one is comfortable in. Uh, I'll give you an example. When we had gone to for some attending some marriage at Rajasthan, and to welcome us, they were frying samosas and jalebis, and the very tempting aroma was spread across that shamiana which they had built for us. And one person, typical from Bombay, speaking Bombay Hindi, declared, "Are kitna acha baas aa raha hai." And the people got very upset, because it's in a negative connotation, bas. He should have said some other good word. But it actually he should not have spoken Hindi in a place where people speak Hindi when he is not strong in it. So Germans, Japanese, they don't know English. They have an interpreter. So the second rule in communication is never speak important things in a language that you are not strong in. And if you are going to take decisions on somebody speaking to you or writing to you in a language that you're not strong in, always have an interpreter. The communication cannot be looked at in silo. It is not a particular skill set which you look at. It has to be looked at cohesively. It is more about having a very high EQ, you would say, emotional quotient. And believe me, it is very tough to develop. We all have our egos. We all like to be appreciated. We all get hurt, upset if somebody says anything. But one has to be focused on and get the job done without getting disturbed by, they say, their noise around you. I can give you an example. When I was in my late 20s or so, I was part of a team which had just completed a project, and the next project was to go to US. And I was very excited. I was very keen to go abroad, and I had read all about the project. And when the manager came and asked about the project, he came and asked me, "What do you think about the project?" And I, had read the project in depth, and I gave my opinion about it, about how to implement it and what are the probable constraints and this that. And he sort of ridiculed me in front of everyone and started screaming in a very abusive way that this is not feasible and you think you're thinking out of the box, but this is against the law and this, that, and all and everything. So I just kept quiet and I was extremely hurt and upset. But then after some time, because I was just focused that I want to be part of the team and go abroad, I jotted down all that he spoke. And then in the evening, when I was in a calm state of mind, I went and told him that, see, what all you spoke does make sense, these 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And that is why the management is prudent to make you the manager and leading the team. But just consider this 1 or 2 points which I have also mentioned, and I mentioned those points. And then he was in a very, I don't know, open frame of mind. He really appreciated it and said that you must be part of the team. So my work was done. If at that time I had reacted, and if I had got upset, if there tears had come to my eyes, or if I had lashed out to him some way, then they would have said, we don't want such a person in our team, and I wouldn't have been part of the team. So it's very, very necessary to develop a high EQ. High EQ is basically to be focused on getting your job done and not getting disturbed by whatever people say or do anything around you. It's very tough. It is being responsive and not reactive. It's very tough, but with practice, one can become better and better at it. So then somehow, as I said, communication is not just talking properly and writing properly. It's a whole gamut. So we sometimes get biased with the people, the way people dress, because we are so used, our eyes are so used to seeing us dress in a particular way that we can't accept, or we sort of get put off with somebody dressed in another way. Like I can tell you, when I was attending a conference in abroad in Boston, there were people, normally when you attend meetings and all, you wear pastel colors. Even if you're in your ethnic clothes, you wear light colors and all. But there was this lady from Africa who had all possible 7 colors of the rainbow on her dress, and very, very dark. So we just got put off, with her and said, what, not taking her seriously when she started talking. But the way she spoke, she had so much of substance and so much of good points that the project, if we had charged X amount, we could charge X plus much more amount. Could increase the cost, the price to the client a lot. She got a lot of value to the table. So we can't get biased with the way people talk or speak. It is up to them. We have to take their benefit and not try to, be in groups with like-minded people, and the way with the like-minded how you dress or talk or anything. Again, in organizations, especially big organizations, the structure is very complex. There is something what we can say would establish themselves, and you have to go via them if you want to speak to your boss. Uh, so that is there, but you have to be smart. You have to have a strategy in place where you really should be able to speak to your boss without disturbing them. Now, these chamchas are there. They will go to receive the boss at the airport. They will attend the boss's dog's birthday party. And even if they don't like dogs, they will go on spending time and saying how wonderful the dog is. And even if that child is the boss's child is not well behaved also, they will go on praising the child, and the boss knows that the person is just flattering the him or her. But who doesn't like this flattery, and who doesn't like being constantly praised? And somehow they come to rely more and more on them. And also, I have seen, you have these old boys club where men, after a meeting or something, they will sit together and talk about some property matters or something. And there is a sort of bond created. While the sisterhood amongst women is often missing because we just want to run home. But we have to find time to create this sisterhood amongst ourselves. And it may not be always discussing hard skills. It could be painting together or watching TV together. No agenda as such, but this strong bonding, this sisterhood really helps us to, build up self-confidence, build up self-esteem, and know that someone wants that this or matching your opportunities with somebody's strengths or something. So it is necessary we build up this uh, chain of sisterhood amongst ourselves. Attitude is very, very important. There are some people who are introverts and they hardly talk. I mean, of course, in our times, the Sholay movie was very popular. Many of you are very young and may not have, not so familiar with the movie, but you can see the clip where Hema Malini goes to pick up Amitabh Bachchan and Dharmendra from the railway station, and she comes in a tanga, in a horse cart. And she goes on talking all the time, and her name is Basanti. So every time she says, no, Basanti ne ye kiya, Basanti ne ye bola, Basanti ne ye dekha, Basanti ne ye khaya. And she goes on and on. And then she says, I'm talking so much, you all have not even asked me my name. And then that is Amitabh Bachchan's iconic dialogue. Basanti, tera naam kya hai? So that is an extreme form of being an extrovert. And then you can become a laughing stock in the office if you talk too much. But you have to talk. Unless there is visibility, you cannot progress in life. And also, you have to be mindful. You cannot be insensitive if somebody resumes office after a long time because there has been a death in the family or because the person was very sick. You can't just start talking about the work. You have to inquire about the uh, untoward thing that has happened in his or her life. If it's somebody's birthday, marriage anniversary, or whatever, you have to wish them. So that mindfulness, that empathy has to be there. And then that person remembers, and it a sort of feel good feeling is created when you are there around, when you, if you behave in such a way, if your attitude is correct, if you're mindful, and people want to work for you. This is something which in our childhood we may have all of us gone through this poem because it's there in all languages, that there are six blind men and an elephant comes in front of them. The first blind man touches the side of the elephant and says, oh, it's a wall. And the second blind man touches the tusk of the elephant and says, oh, it's like a spear. And the third touches the trunk and says, I think what I'm touching is a snake. And the fourth touches the knee and says, I think this is a tree. and the fifth touches the ears, and I think it's a fan, and the sixth touches the tail and says it's like a rope or something. So the all the six men perceive things from the way they look at it. So one can never in life consider other people's opinions, consider other people's perceptions, and take a cohesive look, take a 360-degree look, and don't be just have a very narrow outlook for things. You have to broaden your perceptions, broaden your visions, and for that you have to work in a team and not be just be do your own thing and be done with it, because that has no impact. The impact is there only when you work together and look at a larger picture. There was another research carried on where there were five monkeys in a cage, and they kept a banana hanging, and there were steps to take the banana. So monkeys and bananas. So the fastest, the quickest monkey went running up the stairs to grab the banana. And then they threw cold water on the other four monkeys. So what the other four monkeys thought that because this monkey has gone to get the banana, they've thrown cold water on us. So they'd stop the monkey from taking the banana. And then they changed one monkey and put a new monkey. And again, the new monkey went to take the banana and they threw cold water. And so they stopped that new monkey. So they went on changing. And then the monkeys in the cage would not allow any monkey to touch the new monkey to touch the banana. Ultimately, there were monkeys in the cage who had never been sprayed with cold water. Still, they never allowed anybody to touch the banana. So this is like herd mentality. Mindlessly, without thinking, we do things because others are doing it that way. We never stop to think, why is it done that way? Can it be done in a better way? Can it be done in a faster way, in a more efficient way? So this is being innovative in your organization. And very often we don't do it. We just keep doing the way things are done. And it is called herd mentality. One has to be unique and think and do one in the one you want to do it in your own signature way. So effect in having follow up for what you are doing. So suppose you tell somebody to do your work, it is your responsibility to see that other person has done the work. And one cannot grumble that the time has gone and the work is not done. Like, I can give you an example. I was leaving the office once, and somebody came running with some documents. I said, get this signed by this person. It's on your way home only. And that person was leaving going out of Bombay or somewhere abroad. And it was very necessary that the signatures were made on the forms. They had to be filed with the ROC or something. And there was some hefty penalty if that was not done on time. So once you sit in the car, you leave the office, you switch off, and I was just driving, and then that person called me up after some time. I was nearing the client's place, a gentle reminder that you go and get his signature. So I said fine, and the work was done. But if the person had not sent the reminder, I wouldn't have got the signatures, and that person would have been blamed that that person was responsible for getting that work done. So you have to always, follow up whatever you have delegated also to see that the person, because it is not the job of that person. The person may not give that much importance to that person. Also, communication is all about listening. And let me tell you, listening is very, very difficult. Uh, we all do passive listening, meaning hearing and not listening. Like today, people also may have logged in and not actually hearing. Just not listening, just hearing as what's going on. So very subconsciously, we do passive hearing. Somebody is talking, let them talk. We don't digest everything. Selective listening, yes, we only listen what we want to listen. And emphatic listening is, listening with so much attention that if the speaker is angry, we get angry. If this writer is upset, we get upset. If the speaker is happy, we get happy. If the writer is in a depressed state of mind when he's writing, we get depressed. So we pick up the emotions of the person who is communicating with us. That is also not right. The best way of listening is active listening, where you listen only to what is being spoken. Remove all the emotions, the toxicity, the emotions from the talk or the written word, and come to the crust, understand the issue, and don't react, respond. So that is actual listening. So it doesn't matter whether the what is the person's tone or pitch. It doesn't matter the language. It doesn't matter the emotions in which it is delivered. You just have to understand the crust of the issue, analyze it, and then respond to it and not react to it. That is listening. Also, if you've not seen the movie Ek Ruka Hua Faisla, you should see that movie to understand the strength of communications. Like it was in that movie, I think it is the Hindi remake of this 10 Angry Jurymen or something English movie. There was a play also on that. That there is it's a jury system, and one person is being accused of murder, and in the jury, if there are 11 people, 10 people are convinced that this person has committed the murder, and only one person is convinced, is thinks that the person has not convinced committed the murder. And how in a persuasive way he could make all 10 people come to his side and say that okay, he has not committed the murder. So the power of talk, the power of words is extremely powerful. So the another important rule in communication is that when you communicate, you have to know why are you communicating. Are you communicating to inform, to warn, to train, to instruct, to advise, motivate, or to convince? So then your way you communicate has to be different. Like in, I had watched live one football match also, that before the interval, they and the way the coach spoke to the his team, that motivated them to such an extent that after the break it became 5-3 they won. So that is the extent you can motivate people when you talk and make them more productive. But you have to know why are you in talking, why are you writing, and then accordingly your the way you will structure would depend on that. And of course, one has to be honest. Honesty is the best policy, we all know. But one has to be politically correct. You cannot be so honest and, spoil the environment and, demotivate a person. Like I know once we were doing a PPT together, a friend of mine and me. And I had supplied all the content and she was putting it in a proper format. And just before entering the room where we had to do the presentation, she looks at me, am I looking good? Oh, she was not looking good because full night she was doing the presentation and she had no time. And normally she's better groomed. But I couldn't tell her that. I said, it doesn't matter how you look. You know your stuff and I know you will present well. I remembered, once there was a rush in the bank, and years back when we used to go to the bank to withdraw money, the bank manager came to help the people at the counter, the teller and all, to help them because of the rush over there. But the people at the counter had their own system, and the bank manager coming and helping them was not working out. In fact, it was delaying things because the bank manager didn't know the system which they were following. So then, very jokingly, the manager asked them, good, I came to help you all. So, was it useful? So, they couldn't be dishonest, but they couldn't be brutally honest also, because you can't upset your boss. So, they said, yes, yes, we really appreciate you finding time from your busy work. But somehow we are used to a system, and it was difficult for us to align the way you were working. So, the manager understood. The message went through, but in a gentle way. So always be subtle, be gentle, but be honest. Timing of communication is also very important. You cannot be speaking to a person or something, some favor that you want when that person is upset. Like suppose I had observed one junior approaching a senior when the senior was arguing with somebody on the phone a lot. So as it is in a off mood, you cannot be asking for a favor. It is not going to happen. So your timing is also very important. Um, then we all know communication can be formal and informal, just as hard skills and soft skills, both are equally important. So also formal communication and informal communication, both are very, very important. Formal communication are your circulars, letters, memos, and policies, and all which are sent to everybody in the organization. And informal is your grapevine, which has its ups and downs. I don't know if as kids, if you all play Chinese whispers, you sit in a circle and everybody says the first person says a sentence in another person ear. The second person repeats in the third year or her in the year. It is something totally different. So very often in informal communication, things get distorted. So you have to be I mean, that is the downside of informal communication. Downside of formal communication, everybody is like, it's like a tailor-made item. Everybody is treated on par, while you may be having some special skill sets, special needs or something that way. So you both formal and informal have their downsides, but one has to take the benefit of the upsides. In informal communication, you understand where a person is staying, what are the strengths of that person. Accordingly, you can take them in your team. On is how we manage to take the benefits of the upsides of both formal and informal communication, and be mindful of the downsides of both formal and informal communication. So you need to communicate with your boss, you need to communicate with your colleagues, you need to communicate with your juniors. Now, your mode of communication, your tone of communication, your type of communication will depend to whom you are communicating. Today, sometimes your bosses are younger to you, also, and sometimes bosses may be senior to you, but times have changed. That bureaucratic system has gone, and they act very friendly with you. You may be them very much their junior, but they will go for movies with you, parties for you, call you over home for lunch, dinner, and be very friendly with you. But mind you, they are your boss, they are your bonus, your salaries depend on them. So keep your distance and always be respectful to them, however friendly they are. Your colleagues, you are on par with them. So you cannot allow them to boss over you. See that they are on level with you, and you have to have a kind of different rapport with them. Your juniors, yes, you cannot, be autocratic with them. But if you want work, ultimately it's going to help you. So you have to be very compassionate to your juniors. Juniors may be arrogant, but it doesn't matter. You have to have a very high EQ and be focused on what you want from them. So just as you have communication inside the organization, you have your external communication, the entire value chain. The people who are supplying to your organization, the vendors, or if it's a service organization, the queries that the people come with queries and all. Then you have your employees, you have your colleagues, then you have your customers, your clients to whom you're giving the service, you have the government to whom which you are interacting, paying taxes, if it's a bigger organization, the shareholders, the lenders, the bankers, and in general, the society where your branding happens. So you have to have good external communication with your entire value chain. So you have to represent the organization, even if it is the last day of your organization. You have to see that you represent the organization well, because tomorrow, if you leave the organization, you will always be ex that organization. You can't bash up that organization because it reflects on you. So I know I was in a meeting, and the HR person in that organization was speaking so good of that organization and trying to, bring out the highlights, the good points of the organization. And then at the end of the day, I understood that it was her last day in the organization. From next day, she was joining another organization. But you have to, as long as you are part of an organization, see that you represent the organization well, because you are part of that brand. If you sort of demean or try to mock at that organization, you are doing it harm, you are harming your own self. Written communication is very, very important, and as chartered accountants, we are all aware of that. But the other side of that is when you write, there is more clarity of your thought. And when you write, you realize that okay, you were speaking something, but actually you meant something else. There was something else which had to be given more importance. So there is more clarity in your own way of thinking if you write something. And of course, when you send things in writing, there is an evidence that this has happened, and the opposite person cannot argue that I was not informed. It is documentation for further use also because a template is made ready. Like I remember once we were working on a project in the client's office, and the client wanted us to work in his office, not in our office, and we had to use the client's desktop. And after some time, the IT person was not coming to put in the password and make us start open the desktop also. So I sent an email, said the work is going on fine, we've got all the information that we needed, and it has commenced. But the only issue is that we don't have access to any to your laptop, and we can't use our laptops, and I don't have access to your desktop. So it is sort of creating a hurdle. As soon as I wrote that letter, within seconds, the IT person came running, Madam, why do you want to put things in writing? So he got scared. So we see that when we want refunds or anything, uh, something in writing creates more of an impact. So always see that things besides your WhatsApp message, besides your oral communication, important things are there is evidence of that. It is in writing too. And again, to repeat, just as hard skills and soft skills both are important, so also verbal and non-verbal communication both are very, very important. Non-verbal communication is called kinesics. It is your expressions, it is your postures, it is your gestures. You all know how to do this Miss Universe, Miss World, and all this. People are trained, big money is spent on how they present themselves. So this comes, it comes naturally also, and it comes with practice also. Then you have oculix science by itself, where when you speak, you have to look at the person in the eye. That makes a bigger impact. The opposite person feels important. Today I have seen, you people keep playing on their mobile or reading some messages when you're speaking to them. And if you tell them, please listen, say, I'm listening to every word that you're saying. I will repeat what you have said after you have said. I'm multitasking. That doesn't look good. You have to look eye to eye when a person is talking. Then happenings in certain cultures, touch is appreciated, in certain it is not appreciated. Like I had gone to South Korea for some work, and they told me there specifically, don't touch anybody on the head jokingly also, or any this thing. It is not considered to be good. While in our country, touching on the head to a young person is considered a sort of a blessing. So you have to be mindful about this touch also. And there is a science of keeping distance also, chronemics it's called. How do you go, how close do you go to a person while talking, how much distance you keep? You have to understand that, like once there was a group photograph being taken, and one person was standing little away, and after the photograph was sent to all, everybody started laughing. अरे क्या एटीट्यूड है इसका, नहीं खड़ा रहना है हमारे साथ, तो क्यों नहीं रहना था ना, क्यों आया फोटो में, इतना लंबा रहना था. So actually there was nothing in his mind, he just stood a little distance away. So your tone, your pitch, your volume, your speed, that is called paralanguage. That will keep changing depending on the need. Like suppose it's something very important that you're speaking, you'll speak very slowly. And something very ordinary, routine, day-to-day matter you're talking about, it would be fast. So you have to understand that you can't be speaking very important things which are going to have an impact on the bottom line of the organization in a very fast way that people don't grasp it. These are the 7 C's of communication. And believe me, I have friends who are CEOs and CFOs who have this on their table, and they know that if they follow these 7 C's, they can't go wrong in a deal. They can't go wrong in any client servicing. They can't go wrong in losing the market share. So one is clarity. There has to be clarity in what you speak. It doesn't matter whether you speak English, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, German, Japanese, Chinese, whichever language you're speaking in, there has to be clear understanding of what you want to communicate. Second is completeness. You can't be, uh, writing an opinion about a project and not giving all the parameters what the client is looking at. If the client is looking at as the impact on the ROI, you have to give it. You can't just stop at looking at the impact on the inventory. Or a simple thing that you send a circular for a meeting, you give the time, you give the date, but you don't give the venue. So there has to be completeness in your communication. There has to be conciseness. you can't be writing, it's not a writing long stories in the business communication. It has, like, we've all done pressy writing in school. Or you can see highlights of a cricket match, how they show. It has to be the gist in a very concise way that the person knows what you're trying to speak, or in a very fast way. Consideration, or you can say competency, maybe you are communicating with somebody who should have the competency to do what you want to do, want it to be done. Like, you can't be asking a hardware person to do some software job of yours, or a software person doing a hardware job of yours. So it has to, you have to consider the competency of that person. And correctness, you cannot bluff. It comes back to haunt you. You cannot say you've done this when you've not done it. Whatever has to be communicated in business communication has to be factual. And concreteness in business is not an informal get together that you just talk for talking's sake. There has to be a reason. Like, if you have seen the movie Fiddler on the Roof, a beautiful movie, and there's a song, if I were a rich man, I would build a staircase that goes up, staircase that goes down, and a staircase that goes nowhere. So it is, talking and writing in the business world is, there has to be a reason for it. And also then courtesy, that we have all seen Munna Bhai movies, Munna Bhai MBBS and all, where it was highlighted how important courtesy it is, should become part of your DNA. It doesn't matter to you what the opposite person is, a peon or a watchman, or a junior to you or a senior to you, or a client, or a client who's leaving you, or whatever, or even the customer who is complaining against you. You cannot sacrifice the sea of courtesy. That has to become part and parcel of the way you talk and write. Okay. Empathy is what you have to. Empathy is different from sympathy. Empathy is understanding the opposite person's mood, uh, and understanding how to speak to the opposite person or write to the opposite person, getting aligned with the people around you. So if a person is feeling sad in an organization for some reason, you have to cheer up that person without being intrusive. You cannot enter the person. Colleague of ours was admitted to the hospital for some serious it was a big surgery and all. So the colleagues, we all colleagues went to meet him. And the first question one asked, Are insurance to tha na aapka? Medical insurance tha na? As it is, he has gone through a major expenditure. We don't know whether he had insurance or not, or it was not, if it was adequate or not. You further rub salt on it. So one has to be very, very mindful of what one talks in such a way that you have to cheer up the person, you have to understand the person's issues, and support the person without crossing boundaries, without being too personal. So words heal and words also hurt. The words can motivate, they can give stress also. Words give you that feel good feeling and make one uneasy also. So you cannot control the opposite person, and you cannot be judgmental about the opposite person. If the opposite person hurts in a way that hurts you, the opposite person speaks in a way that gives you stress, the opposite person writes letters to you, or corresponds with you in such a way that makes you feel uneasy. No, you cannot control that opposite person. You have to have a high EQ and understand what the opposite person is trying to communicate, and just go to the gist of the issue and remove all the toxicity. Don't get swayed by any way with emotions. Be focused and get your work done. But you, as a person, should see that your words heal and don't hurt. You should see that you always motivate people around you. You will also rise with them and they will be useful to you. You see that you spread that feel good feeling, whatever the others around you may be. So, this attitude of being positive, being happy, leads to being productive and comes natural to you. And then that negativity, being dispirited, having low productivity, all goes away. And those who are negative, they cannot influence you ever. It's like, chakra around you. You are protected with your own attitude, with your own way of communicating. So communication is not only about talking, writing well. It is also about protecting yourself from going into that dark space of negativity or depression and being productive and happy all the time. So actually, as I said, I was a practicing chartered accountant for many years. I was partner in a CA firm of repute, then PD Kunte and Company. My email ID is still the same. Then my firm merged with CNK Associates, and I called it a day. I retired and I entered academics, and I do a lot of corporate training and all. So, so mostly I do training, do corporate training in basic concepts in finance for mid-level management, maybe accounting, maybe costing, maybe strategic management and risk management or capital markets or something. But because of my age, people started calling me to do on communication skill sets. First time, I think WRC called me to do that. And I had never spoken about communication skill sets. So what I did was I went and spoke to about 10 clicked for you. What do you think clicked for you? And all of them said, yes, soft skills, I think, was one of the reasons which saw our career growth. And they said that what they need feel is necessary is that one should always have an entrepreneurship spirit, even if it's not your own organization, you're working for somebody else. You have to think it's your own organization, and that is called in being an intrapreneur. That be think and be innovative, be creative, and always take leadership. Don't wait for the fruit to fall on your lap. Just stretch your hands and start designing projects, start innovating projects, start thinking of ideas and implementing them. And however much you progress in life, be very, very modest always, because there is always something to learn from somebody not so doing so well as you. And always be analytical. Analytical meaning is not that you use statistical tools always to analyze things, but it is being being able to look at things without being carried away with emotions. And common sense etiquette is always there. It has to come natural to you. uh, it's common sense that you get up when somebody comes to the room or open the door for somebody. Some these simple things also make an impact. And you have to be aware, as just as I said, the need you're communicating, why you communicate, to inform, to warn, to train, to motivate. And maybe when you start your career, you are a generalist, you do many things, but slowly as you progress, you must have some differentiation, some niche area where you focus on, and some cause that you identify with also. That makes a difference. Like I've seen in emails, people say support acid victim, or support cancer patients, or support street. Your skill set also, if it becomes very niche, there is a greater chance for growth, but not in the beginning. And of course, all these tools you have to, it has to be with the 7 C's. Only then you are a good communicator, which is very necessary for career growth, for success and happiness. Skills at a different league with M&A deals, not allowing the deal to go sour, not letting there be any deal breakers in the talk, and letting the M&A deal go through. You require tremendous communication skills. Or when you are applying for a loan and you don't have collateral, or when a trade union leader is coming and saying that it is going to be tools down, and you unless you pay us a bonus, and you don't have the liquidity to pay bonus, or you're signing some contracts and you want some clause, how do you communicate and how do you negotiate and get what you want? That comes by practice. Actually, there is one very nice book, Mintzberg, 10 Schools of Strategy. If you can Google about it. Actually, it was a research paper written by three people, but because Mintzberg was the first author, it is more popularly known. And those are strategies which you can adopt in life, how to deal with issues, but then you have to customize it to the need. Because sometimes a certain strategy is useful, sometimes another strategy is useful. So we've all done set theory, the Venn diagram and all that. There are people who are happy, there are people who are successful, but there are very people who are both successful and happy. So what does it take to be happy as well as successful? By success, you mean actually what and from whose perception? As your age progresses, your definition, your understanding of success also changes. And one has to understand that everyone's level of what they think is the right level of success or they think is the right degree of happiness also will change because each of us is unique. So success is both in quantitative terms, is very easy. What is your bank balance? What is your portfolio? How much property you have and all. But qualitative, because we are going to keep all this behind and go, qualitative is equally, as say hard skills, soft skills, both are equally. Also, quantitative, qualitative, both are important. You have to have quantitative financial success, but qualitative also. How many people can you call up at 12 o'clock in the night and say, "Speak to me, I'm not getting sleep"? How many people you can just call up in today's world without sending a message? Can I call you? How many people can you just barge into their homes without informing them that you are coming to meet them? In a finance or accounting or CA's or chartered accountant's viewpoint, we all know what is point of indifference. The point of indifference is the point where the earnings per share remains the same, whatever be the source of financing, whether it's debt or equity. Similarly, we have to know the our point of indifference in issues. If it is not going to impact if your earnings per share, meaning your health, your career, or your happiness, just let go. Don't make an issue. Don't bother whether it is here it's debt or equity. Don't bother whether it is to be done in A way or B way, whether the person has spoken in this way or that way. If the person says this is so when it is not so, just let go because it is understand the point of indifference. If it has no impact, just let go. We all know financial leverage that yes, when you have more debt in your capital, earnings per shares goes up more than in proportion, but it can work the other way around. But in life, if you don't take risks, there is no gain. So you have to take risks, you have to delegate, and even if the work doesn't get done well, and only then you will reap the benefits of leverage. You all know have done NPV analysis where we convert the cash flows into the present value, and we think take the decision as the present value as is, considering what is going to happen in the future. Similarly, in life, we should always have a long-term vision, but be grounded as to what is happening now. ABC analysis and inventory management is one of the finest theories where you segregate things between A, B, and C, where A is very few items but of high value, B is few items, medium value, and C is the majority items which have low value. So in life too, also or during a day or during a day or in the week or month or the years or an entire life also, there are very few things which matter, which have an impact on your health, impact on your happiness, impact on your financial well-being, impact on your career. There are very few things. Just focus on them. Forget the B items, forget the C items. There is no point in wasting your time and energy on that. And very many people do that, focus on B and C items. Unnecessarily, energy, time, money goes in that. And the people who are successful and happy have applied this ABC analysis of inventory management to their life, and it has worked. And cash management is very important. I know many chartered accountants who are so busy and 31st March, they forget to do their ATC investments if at all they are not in the new scheme and or their tax savings, they don't make their budgets and all. So cash management is very important in corporates, in organizations, and even at individual level. And we all know as accountants the concept of accrual, that you account for things though you have not actually received it or spent it. Similarly, even if you have done some good and you don't get the recognition for it, you don't deserve, you don't get what you deserve. Sometime on the life, it has accrued to you. It is going to come back to you. Or you stab somebody behind the back just and be opportunistic. You maybe for the timing you get it, but if that bad thing is accrued to you, sometime it will come back to haunt you. So good deeds, good actions, good words, they accrue to you and they are going to give you benefits sometime or the other. Window dressing, you all know, is presenting a picture better than it is. So be real in life. Don't try to show something which you don't have the competency. Don't try to show something which is you feel you're not worth it. Be real, be realistic, and people accept you the way you are. So I know there is a lot of time. I think then we will spend time interacting. Uh, I'm coming to the end of my thing, that there are certain laws which are universal. Like you have to have balance in life. Like when we eat food, we have to the left you have pickles, papad, you have dal, you have roti, rice. You don't have so much of salt or only dal. So there is a balance. Only then your health remains well. So unless that balance is there in life, you cannot be happy and successful. You have to be little aloof, like surgeon will not operate on you. Look at issues, look at it from a third party view. Be little aloof, don't be too much involved in it. If your emotions are caught, you don't think with clarity. Be creative always, don't succumb to herd mentality, and always have a long term vision. See, today everybody has hard skills because we all have access to the internet. It was not in like in the days when there was no internet. So I'm of an era, I'm a dinosaur in the era when there was no internet. We had to rely on textbooks, we had to rely on journals, good magazines, our seniors, our mentors. Today it the world has changed because at the tip of the finger you have all the possible information with you. So you want to know a GST rate, want to know whether this section is applicable or not, you just read up, watch a video, and you're good at it. So, but uh, what distinguishes one from the other is when one can, give an opinion by being creative. One can read something and see something which others have not understood, have not read, have not looked. You have to look beyond it. And that is that being creative, being innovative today is very, very important. You can't succumb to herd mentality, control C, control V, just copy, paste, and speak. It doesn't work out. You have to think and speak in your own language, in your the way you are made. And always have a long-term vision. Always ask questions to yourself and challenge yourself to answer truthfully. Believe your perceptions, your visions are other people thought of you. Our parents always meant well, they always loved us, but somehow, they created a bias that, oh, when this person doesn't talk much, this person doesn't like this vegetable, this person likes football, this person likes painting. You don't know. It's very difficult to know yourself. Then when you enter college, you do that, you take the line which your friends have taken. You want to be part of a group. You don't want to be left aloof. You start thinking what you are, what your colleagues think you are, what your friends think you are, what your seniors think you are. You have to remove all these, layers of biases, prejudices which are created in your mind by others, and understand your own self, understand your own strength, because every person is unique. You have your own fingerprint, you have our faces are so different, it is so amazing. So we are very unique, and we have to take our own decisions, and not, you can have role models, but you have to have your own way of taking decisions. And a right decision to be happy, to communicate well, and also to be successful, you should always do the important things in your life in the right state of mind. It is when you don't get angry, when you are not upset, when you are balanced, when your EQ is very high. And lower state is when you are upset, when you're angry, when you feel life is not fair with you. So we are not saints. We'll all try often be in the lower state also, but we have to try to be more and more in the higher state, try and have that high EQ, and at least be in that state when we have to take important decisions of our life. And how to be there, it is what they say, you have to know what is your sweet spot. For some people, get balanced by meditating, by praying, by singing, painting. For some people, it is talking. For some people, it is say writing poetry, or for some people it may be reading. For some people it may be reading the Bear Act also, or the court decisions, or some accounting journal, or some tax journal. So you have to understand what is your sweet spot and come to that balanced state of mind, develop, be in that high EQ state, and then take the right decisions in your life. So that's the end of my PPT. 15 minutes left.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful session. Hi, I'm Trisha Shetty. I would like to present a few questions from our today's participants. Okay, so the first question is from Sarita from Delhi. She has asked you how to handle workplace biasness.
Yeah, absolutely. So see, that is workplace bias is, you are not biased, the opposite person is biased. So there are things like we have controllable, one is uncontrollable. So what is not controllable, you cannot manage it. Those depend on macro factors. There are certain macro factors by which people, I see different ages, different generations, different upbringings. You cannot change that bias is going to remain. Controllable things you can control. So which are you have to distinguish the biases, which are controllable and which are uncontrollable. If the bias is created because you are coming late, if the bias is created because you're not ready to sit late, if the bias is created because you cannot get along with people, if the bias is created because you don't speak maybe Gujarati or Hindi or some language which the client is comfortable with. So these are controllable things where biases are created. You can find a solution to them. But if the bias is created because of some reason which is not in your control, just let diversify away. So you develop something else. So suppose the bias is because you are a lady, and they feel that because you're a lady, you're not going to work late, you're not going to go in places where which are remote, or which are like there is no good washroom facilities and all that for stock taking. You may not want to go there, or you don't want to go to the department if those people are not going to speak well and all. So how do you then those biases, you have to think of solutions for them. And they say that in the corporate world, for success, there are only two types of people. There are winners and whiners. So if you whine, you are never going to go up. We have so many role models of women who are CEOs, CFOs. Even Bank of America president is a lady. So how have they reached there? Do you think they didn't face biases? Tremendous. In fact, our times, we faced a lot of biases than y'all are facing in your times. It was, I mean, we went through a tough time facing but the world has changed a bit, but not as much as it should. But you have to be a winner and not a whiner. Find your own solution. As I told you, each person is unique. You find your own unique solution. You have to be creative, innovative.
Thank you for that response. Next question is from Nikki from Mumbai. Can you please explain your journey, how you have entered this field? It would be inspiring for many of us.
Actually, it happened by a chance. I was attending some function of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, and there one person just mentioned that there was a requirement in Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies for a faculty to teach financial accounting. So they said, why don't you go? So I said, no, I don't, I'm not interested and all. But that person who was supposed to take that assignment couldn't do it for some reason. He said, please do it for me. And it was morning 8 o'clock lecture. So I went and I enjoyed it so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it because they were engineers, not knowing, anything. And I had to think and how to put it forward to them somebody who has done 4 5 years of bookkeeping and accounting, and somebody who has done nothing in bookkeeping and accounting and instruct a balance sheet, but read, analyze, do ratio analysis and everything. So I started enjoying it, in fact. And then hardly 2% or not even 0.2% of my income maybe from that teaching. But the joy that I was getting there was tremendous. So actually my husband told me that, see, your qualification is becoming an obstacle in your growth. So do things that you are enjoying. So gradually I started increasing my teaching time from Jamnalal Bajaj. Then I was called at Simsri. I accepted it. So automatically my practice time became a little lesser and lesser. So obviously when you are not bringing in clients, when you're not going on traveling for audits and all, my share became lower and lower. And here in teaching, there's not much money, but I was enjoying it thoroughly. But then slowly my students got placed in bigger organizations, maybe in Tata Power, HUL and all. They started coming to me to do corporate training for management accounting, for financial management, strategic management, and uh, non CA subjects, non-traditional subjects, not audit and taxation, because then I slowly, then my firm merged with CNK Associates, and that time I completely retired and fully diversified to training and corporate training and also it is your calling in life also. So there are many chartered accountants who are doing things other than practice. So one just doesn't have to stick to it because you're qualified to it. But let me tell you, your CA qualification opens many doors. The moment an institute would see I'm a chartered accountant, immediately they would say, give me the assignment. When I was independent director, anytime, always in the audit committee, they want me to be the chairman just because I'm a chartered accountant. So it's a very, very powerful qualification. And we are used to hard work because passing is tough. We're used to reading, going to the minutest details of everything. So that works for us in life, but that should not stop us from doing something different. It could be anything. It could be any entrepreneurship. It could be selling paintings or whatever, storybook writing, stories and anything. And today the world has changed. There are so many careers. Uh, uh, People make careers out of anything and everything. So you can have your own YouTube channel, you can have podcasts, you can have these small videos on certain concepts. Mentoring has become a big thing, education has become a big thing, e-commerce has become a big thing. So I had done once for in a CA conference, the careers for chartered accountants. You have hardcore careers like in audit, taxation and all. And you have allied careers also, in the relating to IBC, forensics and all. And you can have something totally diversified also. So you have chartered accountants today who are CEOs of chemical companies, CEOs of metal companies. So they have totally diversified and picked up other technical skills. So competency is there. You have to understand what your strength is. And that I'm telling you is very tough to know yourself. To we do SWOT analysis, understanding your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, just jotting down four points. What is your strength? What is your it is not so easy to understand who you really are. Is very tough. You have to remove, as I said, those layers of biases which have been created with due to external influence on you. So once you know who you are, it automatically flows your career path.
Thank you. That was a classic case of take chances. If you win, you will be happy. And if you lose, you will be just wiser. Actually, the next question would be again from Nikki from Mumbai. She has asked you to share the movie name for Persuasion.
एक रुका हुआ फैसला. I
Okay.
think Pankaj Kapoor was
Thank you
there.
so much, ma'am. Okay. Thanks to our wonderful speaker, CA Sangeeta Pandit, for uprising us, and also my gratitude to all for taking time to join this session and making it successful. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Good luck to everybody. Good luck.
Thank